Okay, we are now live. Here we have Marie Haynes, who will talk us about how to improve rankings using the Google Quality Raters Guideline. So Mary, you can introduce yourself and then begin with your presentation.
Okay, great. Thanks. So my name is Marie Haynes, and I think we'll probably just jump right into my presentation. There's a whole lot that I have to share. In the presentation, I'll tell you a little bit about my company and what we do, and we'll talk a whole lot about the Quality Raters Guidelines. So let me just share my screen here, and we'll get started. So Google's Quality Raters Guidelines are something that every SEO really should pay attention to. And I think that they don't get nearly enough attention from SEOs. So my goal in this talk is to just give you some good information on what we can find in these guidelines and how you can use it to improve your rankings for your website. First, a little bit about my company. So again, my name is Marie Haynes. For years, I was known as doing Google penalty work, and we still do some work with Google penalties, but primarily what we do now is site quality assessments. So we work with websites that had seen large traffic drops and try to figure out why. And we've had some pretty good success. I'll share some of those stories with you in this talk. Our team now, we're a team of 6 of us, and we're hiring. So if any of you ever are in the Ottawa, Canada area, then I'd love to talk to you about working with us. I do also have a newsletter that talks a lot about SEO. So there's some information on that here for you. Let's talk a little bit about Google's Quality Raters Guidelines. So these guidelines are a document that Google puts out that are meant to train a bunch of, they're not employees, they're contractors, that there are believed to be over 10,000 contractors around the world that use these guidelines. And what they do is Google will give them websites to look at, and they'll say, according to these guidelines, do you think that this website is high quality? And they have specific questions to answer, which we're going to talk about a number of these in this talk. And so these guidelines, they're used for a lot of things. What we think happens is that the Google engineers take this human feedback. And if a lot of humans are saying, hey, this page that's ranking really well is really not high quality because of this and that, then the Google engineers can rewrite algorithms so that that page no longer ranks well. And we also believe that Google uses this human information as a seed for machine learning. And so there might be something where, if a bunch of people say that this particular page is low quality, then a machine learning algorithm can take that information and apply it to every website across the web. And so there's some really good information in here that, again, we should all be paying attention to. If you've ever wondered, Google constantly says, all you need to do in order to rank well is produce fantastic quality content. And then they don't tell you, what is quality content? What do they consider to be high quality? Well, Google themselves say that these guidelines are created to help webmasters understand what Google looks for in web pages. And so this is really, really important. I mean, if you're asking Google, what is it that is considered high quality, these guidelines. Now, the guidelines are 160 pages. They can be a little bit of work to read through. There are tons of examples in the guidelines, but it's not a straightforward read. If you go to mariehaynes.com/book, I have a summary of the guidelines and also a checklist that we use for my team in evaluating sites. So for years, the guidelines were not available to the public. They were only available to quality raters. And in 2015, Google said, why don't we just make this available to everybody? And so everybody, they're available on the web. If you just search for Google's Quality Raters Guidelines or search quality guidelines, you'll find them, and really everybody should be reading them. I want to talk a little bit about the way algorithms used to work. So any of you who have been in SEO for any period of time will know that, we used to have, we still do have the Panda algorithm, but this used to be a very specific, on a particular day, Google would tell us we reran Panda, and then we would see sites that saw hits or maybe saw improvements with Panda. And then we'd wait until they reran Panda again. And the same thing happened with Penguin. The Penguin algorithm algorithm was something that I have been completely obsessed with ever since it first came out in 2012. And this type of algorithm used to run as a filter, again, where on a particular day, Google would tell us, or sometimes they don't always tell us. Sometimes SEOs would have to kind of determine that, hey, I think we had a penguin update on this day. And then we would see very obvious changes in sites that were affected by this update. And that type of thing doesn't really tend to happen so much now. So now Google, they put out algorithm updates several times a day. But this is a tweet from Danny Sullivan, who now works for Google. And if you're an SEO, you should be following this account on Twitter, Google Search Liaison. He doesn't tweet often, but when he does tweet, it's basically Google informing webmasters of, look, here's something that you guys need to know about. And so this was a tweet that came out in March. And Danny said, yeah, we put out algorithm updates on a regular basis, but every now and then they release changes that are much more significant. And so they confirmed that at this time of this tweet, there had just been an update that Google actually confirmed it was a core algorithm update. And these are important to pay attention to. It's rare these days that Google actually comes out and says, yes, we did an update. Instead, what happens is people like myself who deal with a lot of sites that are affected by algorithmic changes, we have to look at aggregate data and say, oh, all of a sudden we're getting people emailing and saying my traffic dropped on this particular date. For example, a recent one was May 24th. There was a big update that I think had a link-based component to it, but Google doesn't tell us these things anymore. So when they do tell us that there were updates, it's important to pay attention. I personally think that every single update that we've had, any significant update at least since early 2017, has had something to do with the Quality Raters Guidelines. And so this is why I think it's very, very important that we pay attention to the information here. I want to talk about the very first, what I believe is the first update that really took into account a lot of information in these Quality Raters Guidelines. And this was February 7th of 2017. I know that seems like a while ago, but we're still seeing sites where we do reviews where it looks like their decline started on this date. So this is very typical of what we're seeing, where traffic is, moving along at a good pace, and then all of a sudden there's a dip. Here's another site that came to us and saw a significant dip, and we saw some sites that looked like this that saw massive decreases. This site was affected starting on February 7th, and then there was another update on March 8th of 2017 that the SEO community called Fred. But really things started February 7th. And so in my opinion, this is again connected to the Quality Raters Guidelines. Here is a tweet that came out from Gary Ish, who is a Google employee, and he tweeted this 5 days after this update happened. Just a random reminder to perhaps read the Search Quality Raters Guidelines, which we're talking about now. And I had the chance to talk to Gary just recently, and I said, hey, when you tweeted this random reminder to read the Search Quality Guidelines, is it because the latest update was mostly about these guidelines? And he confirmed that, yes, this is the case. So every single one of these sites that we saw that saw drops on February 7th, 2017, had issues with something called EAT. And EAT stands for expertise, authoritativeness, and trust. And in my opinion, EAT is even a bigger ranking factor than links, which I know seems kind of insane to say, because for years, SEOs have been focused almost primarily on links. Now, links are still important, but EAT, in my opinion, is more important for the majority of websites. So I'm going to show you some quotes. These are from the Quality Raters Guidelines. We're going to talk about what EAT is and how we can make improvements to EAT to hopefully see improvements in the rankings of our website. So this is directly from these Quality Raters Guidelines, and they talk about EAT being the amount of expertise, authoritativeness, and trustworthiness that either a page or a website has. They say that it's very, very important, and EAT is made up of the quality of the main content, the information that's on the website, very much of the reputation of a website, which we'll talk about more. And there are other factors as well. This is super, super important for any website that's considered to be a your money or your life website. And so examples of these are any websites that show, talk about financial information, legal, medical, any website that sells products and takes money from people. These are considered your money or your life. If you are your money or your life website, then Google wants to be really, really certain that you have high EAT if they're going to rank you well. And this is in the guidelines as well. And so you can see that they say if you are lacking in EAT, you can see that the last thing that I've highlighted on this section from the guidelines is that if EAT is lacking, then the quality raters are supposed to mark this page as a low quality page. And so this is something that we really need to pay attention to. When they talk in the guidelines about what is a high quality page, then the very first thing that they mention is that a high quality page needs to have a high level of EAT. And they talk about the EAT of the publisher being the website itself, and also individual authors, which we'll talk about in a second. And so, I mean, there are definitely other things that Google looks for in terms of high quality, but you can see that the very first thing they mention is having high EAT. Google also talks about low quality pages. And again, in order to be low quality, the very first thing that they mention is if you are lacking EAT, or if your author of your website or that particular article is lacking in EAT, then this can be considered a low quality page. So this is something that we really want to pay attention to. So the question here is, how do you improve EAT? Oh, and we've lost my slides. Hang on here, guys. My slides had issues with the GIF. Okay, let's try this again. So improving EAT is something that's is quite difficult. I'm not going to show you the GIF of the dog struggling to get up the stairs. The point is that improving EAT is difficult. It can happen. And I'll show you some examples in a minute of sites that actually did see nice improvements after we had worked on improving EAT. Something that Gary Ish had said, and this was at PubCon Austin just recently. Oh, and I think I'm not sharing my screen, am I? So sorry, guys. Hang on. There we go. All right, let's try this again. Sorry about the technical difficulties. So Gary Ish had said at PubCon Austin that EAT was largely based on links and mentions on authoritative sites. And it's important to note that mentions don't necessarily have to be linked. So for example, if the Washington Post writes an article and mentions your business, even if they don't link to you, that's something that Google should be able to pick up as a sign of EAT. One thing that Gary mentioned was that Google's really good at recognizing which sites are authoritative and even which parts of sites are authoritative. So, for example, if you get a mention in Forbes, there are two parts of Forbes. There's a contributor section of Forbes, which the contributor section, you can pretty easily pay your way into that section. And then there's the section where it's actual journalists who are seeking out new news. And so if you're mentioned in that part, that's a good thing for your EAT. But if you're just paying for mentions, then Google is really good at ignoring those mentions. So this is something that's really hard to fake. These are all things, again, that are in the Quality Raters Guidelines. So one thing that they talk about is reviews. Now, this doesn't always apply to every website, but if you are the type of website or business where people want to review you online, then it's very, very important to try to get reviews. And what we do when we do our site reviews is we look at competitors and we see, if your competitor has 2,000 reviews online and the vast majority of them are really, really good reviews, and you have 10 reviews, then that's probably a sign that the other website is more authoritative than yours. So you really want to do everything you can to get people to review your website. In the Quality Raters Guidelines, they tell people to look at Yelp, at the Better Business Bureau, if applicable, at Amazon and at Google Shopping. But don't stop there. I think that the algorithms are pretty good at determining there may be a particular website that's particular to your niche. And so if your competitors are getting reviews in a specific place, then that's something that you want to do as well. In the guidelines, they give these examples. Now you can see that this example is from years ago when before Google changed their logo, but this is in the actual guidelines. And unfortunately, in the screenshot, I couldn't give the whole list of things that was in the guidelines. But the point here is that when you search for reviews on this website, there are quite a few reviews of people complaining that they didn't get their right product, that the customer service was not good, and so if you are having overwhelmingly negative reviews of your business online, then that can affect your rankings in a negative way. And now Google does say in the guidelines that every business is going to have the odd negative review. So if a disgruntled customer happens to review you in a negative way, that's not likely to bring your rankings down. But if every single person, if the vast majority of people who are taking the time to review you are complaining about you, this actually can affect your rankings. They also talk specifically about the Better Business Bureau. And I know I get asked a lot about whether you should be paying for a Better Business Bureau listing. And I would say, look at what your competitors are doing. If they are listed in the Better Business Bureau, then that's something you might want to consider. Now, they do say that if you have an A rating on the Better Business Bureau, that doesn't necessarily mean that you're high quality. Any business can have an A rating just because nobody has taken the time to complain. It doesn't necessarily mean that they are the best business out there. But what they point out, and this is a screenshot again from the Quality Raters Guidelines, that if a business has an F rating on the Better Business Bureau, that's a sign of very low quality. And so this particular business, Google does not want to rank well. So if you have a poor rating on the Better Business Bureau, that's something that you really want to improve upon, and you want to work at getting better reviews. Usually, if a business has an F rating, it goes beyond just getting good reviews. It usually means that there are problems with the way the business is running. And so this is where SEO sort of crosses into real life, in that it's very hard now to take a business that everybody hates and make it rank well. Not impossible, but again, if your business has a lot of people complaining, you need to fix that in order to rank well. There is a lot of stuff in the Quality Raters Guidelines about Wikipedia. So not every business can have a Wikipedia page or mention, but if you can, this is a sign of authority. Now, it's difficult to get a Wikipedia page. The community at Wikipedia is very adamant against spammers, against creating your own business site. And so this is something that, not everybody can go out and create a Wikipedia page. However, you can sometimes edit Wikipedia pages to include a mention of your company if it's relevant. And so we're doing some experiments now with trying to get a little bit more authority in the Wikipedia community, just to see if we can help some of our clients get mentioned here. But I have to tell you that that's quite difficult. Wikipedia does not want to mention your site unless you actually have EAT. They may not call it EAT, but you're not going to get a Wikipedia page if you're not known as an authoritative business in your space. The next thing that you can do is to just do awesome things and actually get press. This is in the Quality Raters Guidelines as well. It talks about news articles. Now, again, this is where we talked about, I'm not talking about paying a journalist to mention your business, even if it's without a link. Google knows those parts of the web where people can just pay for a mention. But rather, if people are legitimately wanting to write news articles about you, then this is a really, really good thing. Something that we use a lot of here is HARO. That's Help a Reporter Out. It's a service that will connect you with journalists. So if a journalist, for example, was writing an article on teeth whitening, they may perhaps say, we're looking for a dentist to get a quote from. And so if you are an SEO and you have a client who's a dentist, you can connect the dentist with this journalist. And then there's a good chance that you will get a link back from that. And even if you don't get a link, you have a mention, hopefully on an authoritative site of your business. And this can improve your EAT. So a lot of improving EAT is about just getting the world talking about your business. It's about basically doing good PR. One thing that they also mention is whether you have mentions on authoritative sites. So I included this. Barry Schwartz from Search Engine Roundtable did this awesome series where he just chose a different SEO in the community every day to honor. And thank you, Barry, for doing this. I always have a laugh when I look at the picture that he chose for me. I'm not sure why. I'm assuming that the wine glass is toasting me, but I'm not sure why it's empty. I'm hoping that I drank it. But the point is here that so in our industry for SEO, Search Engine Roundtable is known as an authority. And the fact that an authoritative site mentioned me, that helps my EAT. In your niche, not necessarily SEO, but your clients' niches, there are going to be websites that are super authoritative. And one of the things that you want to do is you want to try to get mentions on these sites, and that will help improve your EAT. Let's also talk about foreign mentions. And the reason why I put this GIF up here is that forum mentions in the past, if we were doing link building for SEO, we would say, well, don't pay much attention to forums. Those links have very little page rank. They're not likely to do much. However, the Quality Raters Guidelines say to look for forum discussions. Now, if you think about it, if I'm looking for information on a particular product, on a particular business, and I find a forum thread of people talking about this business, that's something I'm going to pay attention to. Now, you have to be careful. I'm not saying that we need to go in and spam forums with information about our business, but rather, I would say monitor forums. So you should all have brand monitoring set up either through Google Alerts or Ahrefs does good alerts. Moz Fresh Web Explorer does as well. And anytime somebody mentions your business, whether it's in a review or a forum or some other place like that, you want to keep an eye on that and where possible, reply to these because the more discussion that you can get going online about your business, the better. One thing as well is we'll talk about the individual EAT of authors. So EAT can be important for the entire website. For example, if your website is known as the authority in your space, then you're likely to rank well. But what about individual authors? And so again, the guidelines say that a high quality page has to have, especially if it's a your money or your life site, has to have authors with high quality EAT. And this is a challenge because a lot of websites will hire journalists to write about, let's say, you're writing about a financial topic and the journalist might be a really good writer, but perhaps that journalist has never had real life experience in the world of finance. So that's something where that page or particularly even that website may not rank well because Google recognizes that you're not the most authoritative. Some of the sites that I showed that dropped in February of 2017, this was a common issue for them. So in some cases, what we saw was there was one site that was a business site. They wrote about how to write a good resume, how to get a job interview, how to succeed at your job interview. And they had really, really good content. I enjoyed the content on their site. However, the sites that were outranking them were ones that were written by people who had been quoted in the New York Times and who were perhaps professors at business schools. They were people with tons of EAT. And so this is something where if you are just hiring journalists who don't have real world experience, then you may be seeing ranking drops. This is a particular site that we worked with that had medical information. And they saw a massive drop with the February 2017 update because, again, they had journalists that wrote good articles but had no actual medical EAT. So we worked with the site to actually bring on some journalists that had some medical experience, and they are starting to see some improvements, but they have not established themselves as a stronger authority than some of the very, very well-known medical sites. So we're still working on this. Here's another site website that these guys had a fairly big budget to improve their EAT. And what they did, again, it was a medical site that had tons of good medical information, but very little medical EAT. And what they did was they actually hired physicians to fact check all of their articles. And they created in the author box on every post, what they did was they created an author box that said, this article was written by this journalist and medically fact-checked by Dr. So-and-so. And then they had a link to Dr. So-and-so's profile. And in the profile, they bragged extensively about all of this person's qualifications. And this site, almost immediately, I mean, I guess it took, a few months, but very, very quickly, they saw ranking improvements as Google recognized that they actually do have EAT to write these articles. This is an example of an author bio that I think is done really well. So this is from a site called thebalance.com. The Balance is an offshoot of about.com. So this site has, it has some good history and is known as an authority in its space. This woman, Alison Doyle, if you look at her qualifications, it says, she's recognized by Forbes. She's written these books. She's been quoted by all of these authoritative places. They talked about the fact that she worked for many years. I like to see, we don't know how algorithmically Google determines this, but I like to see on everybody's about page that you say, we've been in business for 20 years, or we have been helping people do this thing for, ever since 1985 or something like that. And so everything you can do to say, like, look, we have experience in this area, or my authors have experience in this area, is good. And it also talks about, how she was quoted in Forbes, the New York Times, CNN. And so if you think about it, if I'm going to read a business article, am I going to want to read one from Alison Doyle, who has all of these accolades, or from somebody who's a really good journalist who can do research? And you can see why Google is ranking sites that have authors that have tons of expertise and authority and trustworthiness as well. I don't talk too much about trustworthiness in this presentation, but we have seen some cases too where businesses that have a history of having fraud, we worked with one business where their main author had all of this history of basically being, it was a legal site, and the main author had been disbarred and did not have a good reputation. And this site saw major drops. So, paying attention to your author EAT is very, very important. Talking more about the Quality Raters Guidelines, there's tons of stuff that we just don't have time to get into everything about. But there is a lot of stuff in there about ads. If your website has ads that are annoying to people, this can actually cause you to be algorithmically demoted. If you have ads where it tricks people, for example, we've all seen those websites where you go to download a product and then accidentally click on a link that downloads malware. That type of thing can cause you to be algorithmically suppressed. We've talked a bit about offsite reputation, but it's very, very important. I mean, if you have a business that, everybody is talking about in a negative way, it's going to be hard to rank well, even if you can get tons of links or, tweak your content in multiple ways. If you have a very bad reputation, you're not going to rank well. We've talked a little bit about fraud. If you have a history of fraud, it's going to be difficult. Now, we don't know how Google determines this algorithmically. Again, I mean, if there's one article that was written about something where somebody complained that you ripped them off or something, that's not what I'm worried about. But if you are trying to do SEO for a company that's just a really bad company with bad business practices, then you're going to have a hard time trying to rank that company. In the past, good SEO could take pretty much any company and rank them well if you could get enough links and if you could make enough good tweaks to the content. And that type of thing is not working anymore. So if you're struggling to rank your business, it may be that the business is not legit. There's actually a section in the Quality Raters Guidelines that talk about if you are your money or your life site and there's very little external reputation information available online, that's considered one of the lowest types of quality content. So, for example, if you have this great idea that you want to produce a medical site about a particular very serious disease, but you don't have EAT and there's nobody, talking about your site online, then it's going to be really hard for you to rank until you can build up that type of reputation. There is tons of stuff in the guidelines about copied content. And we know when Panda first came out, it went after sites that basically just stole other people's content and republished it as their own. One of the things that we're seeing, especially, there was an update in March, which we'll talk about, March of 2018, where Google, they told us that this was about relevancy. And we saw a lot of sites that dropped in rankings. And these sites, they had content that was essentially taken from other sources and rewritten in their own words. So for example, one site took tons of content from Reddit, and then they would just sort of rewrite it so it wasn't technically a duplicate of the Reddit content, and then publish it on their own. And if you as a user were looking at that website next to the Reddit website, there really wasn't any reason for you to visit that website as opposed to Reddit. And so Google got better, I believe, in March at determining which websites actually have the content that people want to see. And again, if you want a summary of all of these things, mariehaynes.com/book. It's something that's free to my paid newsletter subscribers, and you can buy it for a small fee if you want just the book, because there is just so much information that we can find here. Wanted to share just a little bit more about this update that happened on March 9th. I know this is a few months ago, but in my opinion, this was the biggest update of 2018 so far. These are all clients that we had worked with to help improve overall site quality. So let's say that you have been hit by an algorithm update, and we've determined that it was a site quality update. It's rare that there's just one smoking gun that you can fix in order to see recovery. In the past, sometimes there were. I had one site that was hit by Panda, and they had a massive forum, and there were thousands and thousands of pages on the forum that were just empty profile pages or questions that had no answer, and they were very, very frustrating. And so we went in and we deleted all of the questions with no answers, and we no-indexed all of the forum profiles. And with a subsequent Panda update, this site saw a fantastic increase back to even better than they were before. That type of thing doesn't happen very often these days. Instead, what we find is that you have to look at a great number of things. So we usually start with a technical site audit. I mean, if there are things that are making it difficult for Google to find or to parse your content, then those are things that you want to fix. And then we spend a lot of time looking at the Quality Raters Guidelines and determining, do you have the EAT? Do your competitors have better EAT? Are your competitors actually doing things that users prefer? And trying to find, bit by bit, things that we can improve so that people say, oh, this is the best website of its kind, and I want to visit this website. And so these were all sites that, we worked with for quite some time, and then they saw an increase. It usually takes at least a couple of months to see improvements once you've implemented changes. And for a big website, it can take 6 months to a year for Google to recognize those changes. And unfortunately, we don't have anything. It's not like Google Search Console says, we're suppressing you for quality, and if you do this, this, and this, you'll improve. Rather, you just need to keep doing all you can to improve the quality. And then with a subsequent quality update, you might see improvements. If you're wondering when these quality updates happen, you can go to mariehaynes.com/algo, ALGO, and I have a big list of every known or suspected update, including the quality updates, and those you should find quite useful. And that's all I have. So I think at this point, we'll open things up to questions. Let's see here.
Okay, well, it seems that there is no questions. Everything was clear, I think.
Okay.
So this will be all. Thank you for sharing today with us.
Okay, great. Well, thanks for having me. And if anybody wants to reach me and ask questions about the talk, you can reach me at marie@mariehaynes.com, and I'm quite happy to answer questions there.